Greetings, fellow Ambazonians. This is Capo Daniel. I want to react to a video that is viral of Archbishop Andrew Nkea making certain controversial comments, bringing the issue of the so-called Northwest and Southwest, the myth that the regime in Yaoundé have used for a long time to try to instigate hate speech and hatred to divide the people of Ambazonia, the Anglophones, the so-called Northwest and Southwest, if you like, whatever name you choose to call our people. But the people of the former British Southern Cameroon, they have been using these old tactics to try to divide us. Listen to the video and I'm going to react later on.
I did a 2-hour interview with Radio Evangelium of Manfred to explain to the people what had happened in dialogue. What happened? When we went in for a grand dialogue, I must be clear to you, the bishops of this province had already put out a memorandum to the Prime Minister in preparation for the dialogue to stand for federation. We said federation. And this is how we went into the dialogue. Now, this is what I want to explain to your televiewers. Right. When we went into that dialogue and we started talking, this was still the opening of the dialogue. It was Chief, the late von Mukete, who got up and he made an analysis. All the videos are still there. Von Mukete started by saying that the position of the Southwest was that they don't want to have anything to do with the Northwest. And that if they are talking about federation, the Southwest position was that they didn't want any federation as long as that would have them to do with the Northwest. We're all in this hall. And Mukete went back to history to analyze the divisions and the disagreements between Southwest and Northwest. And that federation on condition that Southwest and Northwest are not together. Now, when he said this was the position that the Southwest brought to dialogue. And the Southwest said, 10-state federation. They were for federation, but 10-state federation. People broke out in the hall. And in the end, it is some lawyer who got up and went back to the Constitution and said, okay, with these arguments, there is provision for special status. Because the Southwest position was that they wanted federation, but nothing to do with the Northwest.
First of all, he said a couple of things. One, he said that in the so-called Grand National Dialogue, a platform that did not include any party to the conflict. This was a dialogue between the regime and its sympathizers, not a dialogue between the parties that are involved in the conflict. Yes, the conflict is about all of us, but there are people who are party to the conflict, people who are actually fighting, who are championing the cause. This was not a dialogue between the parties to the conflict. This was a dialogue between the regime and itself. The Archbishop said that, one, they sent a memo that they wanted federation as a solution to the conflict between the former British Southern Cameroon and the state of Cameroon. He further said that late von Mukete stood up. It wasn't a memo, but he stood up and spewed out hate speech, saying that whatever federation they want, they don't want anything to do with the people of the Northwest, the so-called people of the Northwest. Let me use their own parlance. That in any federation they are offering, they don't want anything to do with the people of the Northwest. In essence, Archbishop Andrew Nkea was trying to pass a message that there is bad blood between the so-called Northwest people and the so-called Southwest people. This myth must come to an end. I want to remind our people of the reality. The so-called Grand National Dialogue that was organized by Paul Biya, that was authorized by Paul Biya, and was managed and run by the Prime Minister Diongute on behalf of the state of Cameroon. Even that platform, in its description, it says that people were invited to come and discuss about the Anglophone crisis. It puts the so-called Northwest and Southwest as one, the Anglophones. So the idea that we are different or that there is a bad blood between both of us was not even a subject or even a consideration about the reality on the ground. So this issue that Northwest and Southwest are different are just a myth that are being pushed by the regime. Remember that when you say Northwest and Southwest, you are talking about West, Northwest, Southwest. That means these are one geographical area, West Cameroon. Even the Cameroon constitution that have been reformed, or that Paul Biya decides to change the name of the country, that constitution still consider the so-called Anglophone or the Northwest and Southwest as people of West Cameroon. That means they are one people. So this idea that Northwest and Southwest are different simply because they are designated as different areas means that we are actually different people. It's ridiculous. Remember that the British people, for administrative purpose, divided the so-called Northwest and Southwest as two provinces, Boya and Bamenda provinces, and further subdivided them into various divisions. So just because there is a name for one area and there is a name for another area does not mean that the people are different or that there is bad blood between the people. There are no bad blood between the people of both sides. And we see this issue being raised only when it is the state of Cameroon that is involved. Remember that during the AAC1 and AAC2 that took place in Boya and Bamenda, there was never even a discussion. There was no topic such as Northwest and Southwest, because when both people gather together, they act as one, they think as one, because they are one. So the idea that Northwest and Southwest are different people because they are Northwest and Southwest is ridiculous. What will you say about Bangwa and Bakwere people? You would even think that that is a real difference or real bad blood than the so-called Northwest and Southwest. There are so-called Northwesterners who are chiefs in Southwest, and there is no complaint about it. Even the type of violence or problems you find in community where people migrate from different areas, you don't find that with the so-called Northwesterners who have migrated to Southwest to build the CDC. They are the backbone of the economy. There is no problem between us, people of the Grassfield area, and the people of the coastal area. There is no problem. This myth is being promoted by the regime to push for hate speech in order to attain their political objective, to divide us and make us ineffective. I want our people to know that during the court case in Banjul, where the state of Cameroon was properly represented and the people of the former British Southern Cameroon was represented, the judge, after examining all facts and reality, stated that despite us living with Cameroon for the past years, the outlook of the so-called Northwest and Southwest remains the same, and the people still meet up with the definition of a people under international law. So we are one, and nobody will divide us. We are indivisible. What brings us together have been established formally and recognized formally even by the state of Cameroon. When they grant this issue of special status, they didn't grant it special status to Northwest and then grant another special status to Southwest. They granted it to both West Cameroon, both Anglophone regions, both territories that forms the former British Southern Cameroon, because this territory is one. What makes us special, what makes us unique and distinct is our geographical location that is demarcated, that is recognized internationally. It is our history of being a former British territory. It is our history of being one territory, one people that evolved within one political system. There have never been division. Go back and look at our political history. Ndele party had never had people who were from the Northwest and people who were from the Southwest. They were all one. His alliance with the Munas was never an issue of Northwest and Southwest balance. They just functioned like that. So this myth has to come to an end. Our generation refuses and rejects this idea that exists only within the pro-regime talking heads. Because of this period of John Fundi, I want to remind our people that in 2019, if my memory serves me right, John Fundi visited a village called Lavanda in Victoria, or Limbe, whatever they called it, Victoria 1, where he visited some victims who were poisoned, who suffered from food poison. There was massive population in Victoria or Limbe, whatever name you call it, that came to visit John Fundi. John Fundi was so happy, the population was happy, and when he left, it was the CPDM, Cameroon government official, that they call him Mr. named Motia Matthias, that came out and write a letter to the SDF and was complaining because he represents the regime of Yaoundé, not his population, because the population in Lavanda came out to welcome John Fundi. We also saw the same issue when John Fundi went to visit Fakor in the so-called Southwest in 2019. He was given a symbolic key to the city by the village chief there, by the Fakor chief. The Fakor chief gave John Fundi a key to the city in Victoria, in so-called Limbe. The population and the local chief welcomed him. They didn't see him like a Northwesterner. It was only after John Fundi left that you have the colonial administrator who now pressurize the so-called Southwest chiefs, who were made up of CPDM elites, to send a letter to ask John Fundi to return that key. So the agenda that sets the so-called Northwest and the Southwest against each other is a myth, it's not a reality that is being propagated by the regime. It is strange that Archbishop Andrew Nkea will come out and not talk about what the people were united for. Even the result that the people were seen as one to come and promote this hate, xenophobic speech about Northwest and Southwest. This is a myth. I have offering alternative solution to this war. I have suggested that in defining Ambazonian independence, Bamenda should be given an international airport. And I've had a lot of reaction from all people who say that, oh, you trigger some jealousy between Northwest and Southwest. That there is supposed to be an import in the airport in Tico. Rubbish. This generation is not bound with those your myths and those your fears. We have shattered those myths. We have shattered those fears. When Baby Caroline was killed in Boya, the women in Womb, they rose up and demonstrated on the street. When students were being beaten up by the Cameroon military in Bambili, the women in Fako, they rose up and they protest. So we are one. You look at the Ambazonian camps fighting. The soldiers from Northwest and Southwest, they mix together with each other. There is nothing like a bad blood between us. Yes, our geographical region have been separated for administrative purpose. But we are not primitive to think that because you divide areas for administrative purpose, it means that those people are not one. If that is the case, then you say Cameroon is not one as well. We have even more intertribal fights within us in the so-called Northwest and those in the so-called Southwest than against Northwest and Southwest. So this myth have to stop. Our people are one. Our territory are one. The so-called West Cameroon, the so-called Anglophones, the so-called Ambazonians, the people of the Ambas Bay, we are all one. And nobody is going to promote a myth. This myth start and end with CPDM pro-regime officials. It does not exist within the people. We are one and indivisible. And anybody who is preaching hate speech must be called out. Must be called out. I will continue to lead the effort that my organization and my allies are pushing for. I want to thank those on ground zero, those who represent church groups, those civil society, including some factions within the Ambazonian groups that have taken very keen interest and now very engaged with the propositions I've made. It is time for us to end this unnecessary war. It is time for us to stop helping Paul Biya, because this war helps only one person. There is only one winner, Paul Biya. It strengthens his grip in power and justify the transition he's trying to do. So every sincere and just person must look for practical solutions. The traction this alternative is having within the international community is making people within the regime to rattle themselves, to be rattled. But fear not, this solution will save us. We may not be able to have independence in the immediate future, but we are going to secure our independence and the prospect for future independence within this autonomy that will be defined similarly to what the Scottish people and the Northern Ireland of England they have. Today, these people can have their independence through democratic means. Let us secure a future that will preserve our independence. Let us end the humanitarian crisis and this senseless war. It is time for us to move forward and not to keep on looking backward. It is time for us to look for a just and acceptable solution that is attainable. The enemy do not want anything that is attainable. The enemy do not want anything that is reasonable and that will have the necessary international support to see us through. So we know why these people are generating this type of debate, but our response is very clear. The people of the so-called West Cameroon are one. The Anglophones are one. This myth has to come to an end. It is not the reality. It exists only within the Peter Mafani Musonge and the CPDM elite. The vast majority of our people, Molanjo Lutumbe, and many of our ancestors, they are all one and indivisible. God bless you.